Welcome to Unit 7, conic section over hyperbolas. Let's get started. So these are the two equations for your hyperbolas. This is a horizontal hyperbola. You've got your x is your positive area. The x comes first, so it means it's going to be a horizontal. It's going to run along the x-axis. Your vertical hyperbola has the y coming first, and it runs up and down the y-axis. Now, unlike the ellipse, your a squared is always going to be under the positive term, which means it's always going to be here first. Okay, in the ellipse, the a squared was just the bigger one, but that's not true here. A squared is first. It can be smaller than b. Now your a, let me write this here, is your distance from the center to the vertex. And I'll draw it on the graph. So from the center, here's your center, to your vertex, this is A. This is also length A. So that's your A. And then if it's vertical, there's your center to your vertex. That's A. Now your B is going to be this center out here this way. That's your B. Same thing here. Now, we've got something called a transverse axis. So this length right here, which is the same as this, the distance between the vertices there, that is called your transverse axis. As you can see, it's 2a. That's the length. Is 2 times a, because this is a, and another a, that's 2a. That's the length of that transverse axis. And over here, if it's a vertical, your transverse axis is still here. It's in between the two vertices like that. So these are transverse axes. Now your conjugate axis, let me see if I can get a different color, runs along here next to the vertex. That is your conjugate axis. And the length of that is 2b, because this is b, and so this is another b, so together that's 2b. And here's your conjugate axis on a vertical hyperbola. Right there. So you've got transverse axis and a conjugate axis. And you find them with your A and your B. So now you can see that this transverse axis and then these two conjugate axes, they come together to form like this little rectangle or this box. And that kind of shows us where our asymptote lines are. So from corner to corner, these are the asymptote lines. And I'm not drawing them very straight, but they're the lines that this hyperbola is going to get really, really close to and never cross. See, so from the vertex, it goes really close and curves to that asymptote line here, but it's not going to cross it. Same thing here. It goes through the center from corner to corner. So this should be a little bit wider. And this one should be a lot wider actually. So that's going to help you draw the width of your hyperbola. And I'll show you what I mean in the example. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that your center, this point right here is your center. And that's just your H and K. Just like with the circle and the ellipse, you'll change both signs. So the center is the H and K. All right, so let's put everything together in this example. Here's the equation. And just by looking at it, the x value comes first. So that means this hyperbola is going to be opening horizontally. And our a squared is always the first one, so we've got a squared, and this is our b squared. So that makes a 4 and b 3. And our center is our h and k, remember? We change the signs of both. Since there's nothing here with the x or with the y, it's just 0, 0. Now the transverse axis, let's draw this first and then I'll remind you where it is. So I've got my center. Now A is going to tell me how the distance from the center to the vertex. So whichever direction I'm supposed to go, that's the way the A moves. So since I have a horizontal hyperbola, my A is going to move 4 units horizontally. So I'm moving 4 units to the right and 4 units to the left. So these are my vertices. This is the vertex of that parabola right here and the vertex of the other one right here. Okay, so the B tells me how far I'm going to move up and down. This is how I'm going to create my little box. So I went down 3, I went up 3. And now I've got this nice little box, and I'm going to be careful when you draw it. Oh, I didn't stay on the line. Okay, so this right here, between the vertices, because this is where my curves are going to go, in between here is my transverse axis, remember? This is my A, this is my B, this is transverse axis, this is conjugate axis. Transverse axis is always found 2 times A, which is 8, because my A is 4. My conjugate axis is 2B, so that would make it 6. You can see that this is 8 units long, this is 6 units long. These are my vertices because it's going to be horizontal, so it's going to open this way. And this point right here is negative 4, 0, and the other point is 4, 0. So I've got 2 vertices. And now I'm getting ready to draw my asymptote line. So from corner to corner through the center, I can kind of draw my little lines here. And that kind of tells me the width of my hyperbola. So here's my vertex, and I'm going to draw like this, and it's going to follow along that asymptote line. Same thing on the left side. And there we go. Here's my hyperbola. All this stuff in the black is just how we help to find the yellow part. But the only part of the hyperbola that we've been looking for is the yellow. So the domain and range, the domain, we want to look at the yellow, and it goes all the way from negative infinity, and it stops here at negative 4, because the domain is left to right. And then starts again, there's nothing here, no yellow here, starts again at 4, and it's going to go to infinity. And then my range from bottom to top, you can see this goes all the way down to negative infinity, and it's going to go all the way up to positive infinity. And that's all academic needs for the hyperbolas. You don't have to worry about the foci or the slopes of the asymptotes or the equations of the asymptotes. Okay, so let's try this next example here. And again, you don't have to worry about those things, the foci or the asymptotes. So here's our example here. Because the y is first, that means it's going to be vertical now. So we're going to move our A vertically. Our A squared is first, and our B squared is this one. So see how this time our A is smaller than our B, and that's okay in hyperbolas. So that means our A is 2 and our B is 4. And now we want to look at the center, and we're looking at our H and our K. So my H is negative 2 and my K is positive 1. So don't forget that the H is always with the X and the K is always with the Y. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and find my center here, negative 2, positive 1. And I'm going to move 2 units vertically, because my A is 2 and I want to go up vertically. and then I'm moving 4 units out, right and left. And then there's my little box. And from corner to corner, that gives me my asymptotes. And then since it's vertical, it's going to go up and down. So you can see that this hyperbola is kind of wide, as it follows those asymptote lines. Now, my transverse axis, that's in between the two vertices, and that you could count it, that's 4, or you can remember it's also 2 times your A. And since my A is 2, then my transverse axis is 4 units long. My conjugate axis, that's here to here, it's also 2B, so that would be 8. My vertices, the vertex of each parabola here, this one should be -2, 3, and the other one is -2, -1. Now my domain from left to right, it goes from -infinity to +infinity. And my range, -infinity to -1, and 3 to infinity. This should be a parentheses. And that's it. That's it for the notes. Make sure you do the practice so you can get really good at these. Thanks for watching and see you soon.